This is the Kazdoy Closet. I'm Kazdoy. This is not my closet filled with all the stuff that I love. We're shooting al fresco today. And I did want to talk about biopics. I assume we all know what that is, right? Biographical films about a real person. I'm not a big fan in general of biopics, and let me explain why. I feel like I'm expected to automatically buy into the portrayal of the actor who's pretending to be this real person. Let me give you some examples. Walk the Line, which is a film about Johnny Cash, and Joaquin Phoenix plays Johnny Cash. He's a fine actor, but I feel like I'm just watching Joaquin Phoenix pretending to be Johnny Cash, and I'm comparing him constantly to Johnny Cash. Why not just watch a documentary about Johnny Cash, or watch some footage of Johnny Cash if that's what I'm interested in, and maybe read a little bit about him. Another example might be this recent film, Being the Ricardos, and Nicole Kidman, another fine actress, playing Lucille Ball. And again, I'm comparing her to Lucille Ball. Well, she kind of looks like her here, not really here. She kind of sounds like her, but not really. I have a hard time suspending my disbelief and just losing myself in the portrayal. Probably because I just know Lucille Ball so much from I Love Lucy. And then again, why not just watch I Love Lucy if that's what you want to see regarding Lucille Ball? Now, there are some exceptions of biopics that I like, and I realize that I think it's because they are of historical figures who I am not familiar with as far as what their mannerisms are, or how they speak, or how they move, or their physical or facial gestures. I'll give you a couple of examples. The film Lincoln by Steven Spielberg. I don't know what Lincoln sounded like. I don't know how he moved or how he acted. And so I can totally believe Daniel Day-Lewis's portrayal of Abraham Lincoln. A similar thing with Amadeus. I don't know what Mozart sounded like, or Salieri, or how they moved, or how they acted, so I can totally believe it. Even a film like Raging Bull. I never heard of Jake LaMotta, so I was totally buying into Robert De Niro's portrayal of Jake LaMotta. There are some examples of biopics that are about more contemporary people that I did like, such as Ray. I think Jamie Foxx did a good job portraying Ray, and he had to sing and be blind and all that. Pretty challenging role. And also Jessica Chastain in Eyes of Tammy Faye. I really liked her performance too. But for the most part, biopics, I just feel like I'm watching an imitation of a real person, and why not just watch the real person if they're not going to add anything to it. Now, saying all that, I did watch a biopic last night. Was that an exception? Let's check it out. The biopic that I watched was Man on the Moon from 1999. It's 118 minutes long, in color for the most part. This is the story of the great comedian slash actor slash provocateur slash put-on artist Andy Kaufman, who died way too young in 1984 at the age of 35. He doesn't spend too much time on his childhood, just the very beginning, and it's mostly about his career, and I'll get into a little bit more of that later. The director was Milos Forman, who was born in Czechoslovakia, so kind of an interesting director for this very American story, you might say. And his father was killed in the Buchenwald concentration camp. His mother was killed in Auschwitz. So Milos Forman was an orphan at a very young age. He went on to become a very successful director, earning an Oscar for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which is one of those rare films that won all the top 5 Oscars. He also won an Oscar for Amadeus, and he also made The People versus Larry Flint, which, come to think of it, that's a film that I think might be ripe for rediscovery and maybe like a special edition or something. I haven't seen that since it came out. Jim Carrey plays Andy Kaufman. You can tell it's a labor of love for him. I think it's Carrey's best performance, maybe along with The Truman Show, which is another film I think is underrated and could use a special edition or rediscovery. And he really inhabits the role of Andy Kaufman. I guess you could say he becomes Andy Kaufman. He even puts a little facial makeup on, just some of the pockmarks on his face, and changes his eyebrows, his hair, and his eyes are just really identical to how Andy Kaufman used his eyes. In fact, Milos Forman liked to say, "I never met Jim Carrey while we were filming this film," because he was Andy Kaufman. In fact, people on the crew, the other actors, just called him Andy. It wasn't like he demanded that or anything, like a method thing. It just kind of naturally happened, which is pretty cool. Danny Devito has a pretty major role in this. He plays George Shapiro, a pretty famous talent manager. And Paul Giamatti plays Bob Zamuda, who was sort of like Andy's partner in crime, who was really synced in with his sense of humor, and I think helped him develop some of his routines, and was also even involved in some of it. And then Courtney Love plays his love interest. She has a pretty small part, but she's good as well. The screenwriters were Scott Alexander and Larry Karaszewski, who seem to specialize in biographical films. They wrote Ed Wood, they wrote The People vs. Larry Flint, and they wrote Dolomite Is My Name. And I think all those films, they did a really good job on all of those. So the film covers Kaufman's career. I don't want to get too specific about the routines, but all his famous routines, all his famous appearances are recreated here, and they're recreated with great detail because I've seen all that stuff. And it covers his career in the show Taxi, which interestingly Danny DeVito was in, and it covers his, like I said, his appearances on various TV shows and in nightclubs and in theaters. Interesting, some of the real people in his life make appearances in this film as somebody else. For example, you see his father as an audience member, his real father, in one of the scenes. George Shapiro's in another scene. So various real people from his life show up, which is kind of a nice touch. And very smart move by the director is he did a lot of focusing on the audience's reactions, because people reacted to Andy Kaufman's stuff in various ways. Some didn't know how to react. Some were kind of linked into the humor and knew what he was going for, so they were laughing. Some people walked out. Some people were offended. And so he really pushed a lot of buttons. He wasn't into jokes, and it was also a lot of, is this real what I'm watching, or is it a put on? What is really happening here? George Shapiro at one part in the film says to Andy, "Are you entertaining just yourself, or are you entertaining the audience? What are you doing?" And sometimes it's kind of hard to tell. He also has this alter ego character named Tony Clifton, who's sort of this, the worst possible Vegas type of singer-entertainer, and he can't sing and he can't entertain. He's just terrible, but he's so full of himself, and he's really obnoxious and really sexist, and he says offensive things to the audience. And some people weren't sure, is this Andy Kaufman under a bunch of makeup and a wig and sunglasses, or is it somebody else, or is it sometimes Andy Kaufman? And so that's just part of his appeal and what he was up to. Very different. The one routine I did want to mention is this milk and cookies thing, and they do show that in this film. He did this a couple of times, I guess, but some friends of mine saw Andy Kaufman perform in Los Angeles, and intermittently through the act, he would say, "Later on, we're going to have milk and cookies," or he'd say, "We're getting close to having milk and cookies," and then finally at the end of the show, he said, "All right, it's time for milk and cookies," and he led the audience out into the parking lot where there were a line of huge buses waiting for them. The audience members all got on these buses with Andy. He took them all to a cookie place and bought milk and cookies for everybody. And then afterwards, they all got back on the buses, went back to the theater, and got into their cars and went home. And my friends said they saw Andy Kaufman standing in the parking lot while everybody was driving away by himself, just kind of wandering around. So really interesting, unusual, kind of groundbreaking stuff he was doing. we never really get an idea of how Andy developed this very personal, unique sense of humor or approach to entertainment. We do see a little bit at the beginning of him growing up, and he's sort of putting on puppet shows for his sister, his little sister, but then it goes straight into his first appearances in comedy clubs, and George Shapiro's there in the audience watching, trying to figure out what's going on and showing the audience members, and some of them are confused and some are laughing. And it's just kind of goes straight to that. So we do see the genesis of some of his concepts, usually when he's watching something or talking about something with his partner in crime, Bob Zmuda, who I mentioned. So this biopic, it really does work for me. But honestly, I'm not the most objective person when it comes to something like this, because I'm a big Andy Kaufman fan. I've been a comedy nerd since I was a kid, listening to records of old radio shows that were made before I was even born. And then, of course, Laurel and Hardy and Marx Brothers and Richard Pryor albums. I almost memorized Albert Brooks, Rodney Dangerfield albums before he even had his I don't get no respect thing. I've read about comedy, so I'm totally into it. So of course I was into this too. Also, there is a book about Andy Kaufman that Bob Zmuda wrote, and you might want to check that one out. It's called Andy Kaufman Revealed by Bob Zmuda. I'll probably put it down here so you can check it out if you want to. There's also a documentary, which I haven't seen yet. I think it's on Netflix, called Jim and Andy, and it's all about how Jim Carrey prepared for this role and how he pulled this off. But Andy Kaufman was, a true comedy presence that we have not seen before. I don't think we're going to see again. I think maybe Sacha Baron Cohen becomes closest to what he's doing, but that's about it. So for Man on the Moon, and yes, that song by R.E.M. is in it, and it goes through your head while you're watching this, even though the song doesn't show up until the end, but still, once I saw the title, I kept thinking about that song. I'm going to give this a rating of 4.5 cookies because of the milk and cookies thing out of 5. What's on this disc? There are a few extras. There is a audio commentary, which I did not listen to, but it's the screenwriters talking about it. There is a thing called Spotlight on Location, which looks sort of like a promo, and it's okay. It's showing them filming it. And then there's also a audio interview with Milos Forman and the screenwriters talking about various parts of the film. That's pretty good, but it's just audio only, and you see the subtitles on the screen so you can understand what they're saying. It's kind of in some raw shape, you might say. And there's some deleted scenes as well. Where can you see Man on the Moon? I haven't seen it streaming anywhere. You can always rent it, and you can probably find it at your local library. So, Man on the Moon, biopic that I actually like, believe it or not. So, little flies coming through here. So let me know what you think about biopics, or maybe some of your favorites that I should check out. Leave a comment or suggestion down here. Leave a thumbs up. Don't leave a thumbs down. Subscribe would be great. This is April 26th. My goal is to get to 200 subscribers by June. I'm at 190 right now, so I only need 10 more. Share this episode with your friends and neighbors. Otherwise, hope you like this one. See you next time.